So our speaker today, Dennis Warren, has been a teacher of traditional mindfulness, meditation, and concentration practices and their contemporary use with chronic pain, anxiety, and depression during the last 25 years. This includes teaching courses, workshops, and retreats in professional and community settings here and in Thailand and India. He was an adjunct professor of mindfulness in the UC Davis Division of Pain Medicine for a decade, and Dennis is also the founding teacher of Sacramento Insight Meditation, a nonprofit secular organization offering meditation courses, workshops, and residential retreat for the larger Sacramento community. Dennis is a personal friend. I met him a couple years ago. We were sitting in Napalito Southwestern Cafe, inside table. I looked over and I said, well, this is a very distinguished looking man. And I said, what's your story? And we've been meeting about monthly ever since. And so he has a better sculpted beard than mine. I'm very, impressed with it. But we guys with beards have to stick together, right? All the beard men out there, right? And mustaches, right? So with that, his presentation today, I could be wrong, but I don't think so, explores the relationships between memory, suffering, and happiness. Let's give a round of applause for Dennis.
So thank you very much for coming today. That is true. That's how Ken and I met. And one thing that we agreed on during that meeting is we both felt that men who had white hair and small beards were really handsome. So, all right. So, and Ken said that I was a adjunct professor. I was an adjunct professor. In the Division of Clinical Medicine at UC Davis, and I was actually a professor of mindfulness and how to use contemplative and mindfulness techniques in dealing with pain. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. I have two distinct memories when I was 9 years old. My father was the vice president of a potato chip company. They created the Ruffle potato chip. That was their claim to fame. And so you're looking at a certified potato chip addict, So on Saturdays, he'd frequently go down to work and he'd take me to the factory. And you've probably never been in a potato chip factory, but it's really fascinating because, there's the whole process where there's the potatoes and they shave them, they cut them, they clean them, they fry them. And then there's these big conveyor belts where they dry and then they're salted and they go into the bag. So, all of the guys on the floor knew who I was. I'm 9 years old. Everybody was treating me really well. So I'd go in and grab these potato chips that were still warm, And so the memory I have from that isn't like a distinct memory in the sense that, I can remember all the machinery and the colors of the walls and those kinds of things. But what I do have is like a distinct feeling about how that made me feel, a smell. I mean, whenever I hear a potato chip at a certain heated temperature, it like transports me back there. And then the taste in my mouth. So that's one kind of memory. The other memory was my father was a martial artist. And interestingly, his assistant was an Indian woman, an East Indian woman from India. And so one morning we were there and he said, well, go in and talk with her. She's a meditator and ask her about meditation, So I went in and I said, well, hey, my dad says that you're a meditator and, tell me about it. So she said, okay. And she got a chair and she moved her chair out from behind the desk and put my chair there and sat down. And she said, okay, I'm going to close my eyes and then watch this area right here on my forehead. And when that gets red, I want you to touch it. Okay. So I'm 9 years old and it was kind of like, this was before Star Trek, but it kind of felt like Star Trek, And so she closed her eyes and in a very quick amount of time, 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes, this started to get red and then got, very bright, and I touched it and it was quite warm. So, I would subsequently learn that this woman was quite accomplished. in terms of certain kinds of concentration meditation practices. The Tibetans have practices where they are in below freezing conditions, and they take these towels and fill them with water and put them on them, and they meditate to generate heat, and in like 35, 45 minutes, the towels will be completely dry. And Herbert Benson, who wrote the relaxation response, flew all over the world. At one point, he got really interested in meditation and contemplative practices and went to film this. And there was so much steam in the room that the camera didn't catch the whole thing, you know. So this experience with this woman really sparked curiosity in me of like what actually might be possible as a human being on planet Earth while we're here. And so, you know, I've looked at, I think, everything out there. Like, it seems to me, looking at the crowd, a lot of us are children of the 60s. And, you know, like everything was available to you, and I did it all. And this eventually led me, I actually made it to into various forms of contemplative and meditative practices. And then that's where I found my home. You know, that's what I've been teaching and in various venues for a long time now. So the thing that I love about contemplative practices is while there are spiritual elements to it, there's very practical elements to it. And on the conventional reality side, the primary focus of practices are exploratory in asking the experiential question, what points our mind and our heart into satisfaction and peace, and what points our mind and our heart into struggle and suffering? This is at the focus of all these different meditation techniques. So we're going to talk about memory today in a little different way than you're probably used to thinking about memory. And just as a point of question, how many people here today have like a committed meditation practice of some kind? Okay, good. So good. And then this is great like this, you know, like maybe 20% of the people raise their hands. And so you see that 80% of the crowd doesn't know. And then it's like, well, this is great. I can just make stuff up. Nobody's going to call me on anything. So I don't know how they come up with these figures, but the current estimates are that there are 100 billion neurons in the brain. And for every neuron, there are a minimum of 1,000 synaptic connections, this chemical connection. So if you think about that, like if you were to create like a chart that would be a net, it would be so huge. I mean, you can't even imagine how huge it would be, right? It's like, it's not just a billion times 1,000, because those thousands are all interconnecting. So when you hear that, and then you start to study memory, most of us have this kind of conventional pop idea about memory. That memory is something like a snapshot, or a YouTube video, or an audio clip. And it would be nice if it was. It's not anything like that. And it's more a process of first of all, creation. When our mind stores a memory, you would think that there's like this little package of a memory that gets stored in one particular place in the brain. That does not happen. What happens is that different parts of your experience, what you see, what you hear, what you feel in your body, the emotion you experience, the thought that you have, the interpretation that your mind puts on it, are all actually stored in different places. And then when we call that memory up, the mind has to go in and actually coordinate all of these recalls from these different locations and put it back together in a single package, which includes our emotional response to it. So it's not surprising that we forget a lot. Okay. So, there's all different kinds of levels of this. There's forgetting that, like, where are my glasses? And they're on top of my head, right? Or you forget your keys or your phone. I thought it was hilarious today that I'm working on this, and I go out to my car and I go, "Gee, where are my keys? I thought I got my keys." And I go back inside and they're not where I normally have them. So, I start going, well, gee, could I put them on top of my head? Are they? And what I did was I put them in a pocket that I normally don't put it in. So it's actually in the pocket. I'm not feeling it. And I'm looking like, I'm going, where's my key, So there's that level of forgetfulness, which has a lot to do with whether we're paying attention at the moment that we do something. You go in the parking lot, park your car, can't remember where your car's parked. Next level up is we think we had a discussion or that we said something to someone, and we didn't, or we did, but we said something other than we thought we did, or we said something which actually was quite important and don't remember that we said it. And so you'll have a discussion. I think actually, and I'm not joking, I think this is where 70% of the arguments between couples comes from. It's like, well, wait a second, you said X. And, well, no, I didn't say that, or I didn't mean that. And then the next step up, and this is actually quite common, is that we recall things that actually never happened. So there's lots of famous stories like Oliver Sacks, who is a physician, just, this incredible author. Sacks wrote a book on memory. This is the best part. The book's on memory. It started out as an essay. And in this, he recalls two events during World War II where his family residence was bombed by the Germans. And in one case, the bomb goes in and explodes. And fortunately, everybody got out, but I mean, like a really traumatic experience. The second one, the bomb goes in and doesn't explode, and they're waiting for it to explode and evacuate the house. So in the book, he relates these in great detail. And the book comes out, and his brother calls him, and he says, "Oliver, what the hell are you talking about? You weren't even there for one of the two events." And of course, Sacks said, "Well, do you know who you're talking to?" And what had happened was his brother had written him a detailed letter. And Sacks had read this letter over and over again, the emotional component, he began to identify with it, and then actually thought, his recollection. And this is really interesting because you can hear from this that when a memory is stored, it includes the emotional impact of the event. This is maybe the most important part. George W. Bush was constantly saying that he remembered actually seeing on TV the first plane go into the building on 9/11, okay? Which of course is impossible, right? Because it wasn't being filmed, right? So somebody took a video. Well, and this was pointed out to him many times, and he just said well, I don't believe that. And to this day, he still contends that he actually saw it, that there must have been, some newscast. So there's lots of stories like this, and you may have experienced some of this. If with family members, you'll get together and recall an event, and it's amazing how different the recollection can be. So this brings me to meditative or contemplative practices and how they lead us into suffering and how memory can lead us into suffering. Because at their core, what meditative practices are about, the way we word this is seeing things as they are before the mind adds anything onto it. Okay, so I hold this up and you see that. Okay. Well, that's the event. Now, what our mind adds onto that is, well, is that a bottle of Evian or is that a bottle of X? You know, which depends on where you're sitting and if you can see it. You know, and so there's a difference between an event that happens and our thought about the event, the feelings in our body about the event, our emotional reactivity to the event, the story that we make up about the event. And so frequently with recollection, memory and recollection is notoriously flawed. It isn't like notoriously unreliable. In fact, as a professional, I was a healthcare lawyer. And one of the first things that I found disturbing practicing law, because the type of law I did was all very high risk. You know, people's careers basically were on the line. So people would come in and report a set of facts. And then over time, you'd meet with them and you'd say, well, the other side says X, and the story would start changing. And at first I thought that people were frankly intentionally lying, which a lot of people do. You know, you get in and you realize that if you say one thing, you're in trouble, and if you say another thing, or that I saw another thing, or someone told me a certain thing, you get a different result. But that's actually the exception to the rule. The truth is that because memory is actually a creation, it's a process of storing. So if there's an automobile accident, I see something that's stored in one part of the brain. I hear something that's stored in another part of the brain. Maybe I smell a fire that's stored in another part of the brain. I have like a startled response and fear that goes in another part of the brain, the central nervous system. I start making a story about it. Well, gee, you know, it looked to me like that guy ran the light, and I don't know if it did, but I start making that story up. Well, he must have, because the other car, that gets stored in another place. So what happens over time is every time we recall that memory, the mind has to go in and take that, integrate it into a comprehensive whole. And the mind is not like uncertainty. And so if there's any part that doesn't fit, part of memory is to create a comprehensive, reasonable narrative about what happened. So it'll fill in what isn't there. It will project and make assumptions, but actually create that as part of the memory. And so what we're really getting when we pull up a memory is an impression of what happened. And it changes over time. Now, sometimes it changes like dramatically, and other times it's just kind of shaded. But this is so significant that in California, most states, all of the federal courts, there is a jury instruction, and the jury instruction is based on the assumption that our recollection of first-person events is unreliable. Think about that. And it gives like 10 tests. And it basically says, don't believe just at face value what anybody says. Okay. So does anybody know who this jury instruction is talking about? You and me. Seriously. You know, if something happens and we get called into court, they will say that about us. And so our Memory is highly influenced by bias, by the stress we're under, by preconceived ideas that we have about an event, many, many different things. Okay. So, so I think what I'm going to do right now to kind of help get into the next part of this is in meditation practice, this is a little bit of an exaggeration or an overstatement. It's not an exaggeration, but you can take all of the different meditation forms and they fall into two big divisions. Okay, one division are practices where we take our mind and focus it on something to the exclusion of other things. So you would focus your attention like just on the in and out of your breath or a candle or, I'm sure, does everybody remember TM? Yeah. Where you chant a mantra. And I'll tell you, I found out something about mantras. Mantra is a sound that you use to concentrate the mind, and they can be very helpful, but you have to use them in the right place. So I found out that, like, if you're a young lawyer and you're a deposition, you're kind of getting stressed out, and you say, hey, excuse me for just a second. Oh. It's not helpful. Okay, it's not helpful. So one are concentration practices, and this is the thing that draws people to meditation, usually in the beginning, because you can learn, very, very quickly, within weeks, to be able to collect a scattered mind, take the anxious energy in the body and stabilize it, and have all of that calm down. And we call that different things. You feel centered, or you feel equanimous or balanced. But at the medical center, when we work with pain patients, patients develop habits around pain and they get triggered. And so the first thing we do is just teach them, okay, like, forget about what you're thinking about. Okay? Forget about your pain. Just concentrate just on this. Just stay in the present moment and do these practices, and you can calm yourself down really quickly. It's a really valuable tool. The second set of practices, and these are the ones that are really the most interesting part, is they're exploratory. So this idea that I was saying that a thought is different than an experience, the event itself, or a thought is different than an emotion, or an emotion is different than a physical sensation. Now, they're all related, but they're actually different things. So depending on what you encode as a memory, that comes back out. So if you encode, I'm going to use a couple of illustrations of this in a minute, but if what you encode is a emotional reaction, that's the primary thing that you encode. When you think of that, that's what you're going to get. In the reverse, if something happens that's fairly traumatic, and in the moment, you calm yourself and you look at it, you allow your mind to settle, you look at the context of it, that's what gets stored. So when you recall that, when it comes up, the mind doesn't go into this alarm response. It goes into a broader context of holding the prior experience. And the importance of this is that experience influences the present moment. And my guess is that everyone here in the room can think of something, even at our age, where you can think of it right now and it happened, I don't know, many, many years ago, and just thinking it changes your respiration, your mood, your heart rate. And the way that that was encoded, was created, was stored at the time is the reason that that's happening now. And so the part that I really find fascinating about contemplative practices and memory is looking at that phenomena. So both how am I relating to experience right now, and what am I storing, because that's going to affect me later, and how do I, when I get that response, how do I work with it? Does that make sense? Those two things. So it ends up being eminently practical. So I think we can have enough time to do this. So what I'm going to do is we're going to just do a little like very short meditation session, which will tie into the illustrations I'm going to use. Okay, so if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, we'll do that. And if you don't, just hold your eyes like at a 45-degree angle, kind of a stare, not really looking. So you're just parking your eyes, okay? And then if you're bored, you can just watch me sit here stilly. Okay, so if you feel comfortable, just allow your eyes to begin closing, gently close. And just acknowledge that we're moving into a more interior space of experience, one that is an experience in the body and the mind, as opposed to thought-driven. So if thoughts come up while we're doing this, just don't try to stop them. You can't stop them. But just acknowledge them and just allow the thought to move into the background and allow your attention, your awareness to focus on what I'm suggesting in the foreground. So meditation is about what we're doing with our awareness and with our attention. So let's begin by just opening your awareness to the body as a whole, sitting in the chair. And we're not trying to make something happen. We're just trying to open to the body in the chair and to experience whatever sensations are there. So notice where your attention is called. So you may notice that there's some part of your body that's a little stiff or achy, which you actually didn't realize the moment before. You might feel the pressure of your feet on the ground, or the temperature in your hands. So what is that temperature right now? And noticing the moisture in your mouth. Just allow the tongue to relax and float in the mouth. And see if you can move your awareness into your spine and just find a line of balance from the back of your head down to your sits bone. And then just allow the muscles and the position of the body to relax around the stability of the spine and the solidness of the hips on the chair. So we allow the awareness to move to the breath. And the breath is actually the air coming in and out of the body. So it's what we call the breath are actually a whole series of sensations that are a process. So you might feel the coolness of the air at your lips or your nostrils coming into the body, and going down the throat and the expansion of the chest and the expansion of the abdomen. And just allow, don't try to make the out breath, just release the out breath and feel a sense of release, of letting go, of tension or holding on the full length of the out breath. And watch for the first sensation that you can feel, wherever it is, of the in-breath starting. And then just follow that. And just allow that to bring energy and clarity into your body. Just a little lull between the in-breath and the out-breath, and then once again, just completely release, let go on the full length of the out-breath. And so just do this just kind of quickly. Just allow an image to appear in your mind of someone that is very dear to you. It could be a grandchild, a close friend. Maybe it's someone who's no longer with us. But just bring that image up and experience what it feels like to recall that person, how they made you feel. Your body felt relaxed, open, that you could feel their care and their attention. And then just take a minute to experience a sense of gratitude, of thankfulness for that person and your relationship with them. And just notice how that feels. And then just allow that image to begin to dissipate and bring the awareness back into the body as a whole. Feel the weight of the body in the chair and your feet on the floor, the hands together. Notice the temperature in your hands. Notice if that's changed at all. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. So normally we'd spend a little time talking about that. And we may have a little bit of time at the end, but most people, even with something that short, will feel a little more settled, a little relaxed. One of the powerful things about memory, and there's a lot of meditation techniques around recollection of people in our life who have been valuable as a way of nourishing ourselves. And there's also practices where we call up people that haven't been so good, and we work with that. I didn't do it today, but sometimes what I'll do, I guess this is when I'm in a mean mood, is that I'll ask someone to think of someone in the political arena right now that they're upset about. And what happens is that you see that like a single, and this is where contemplative practice and medicine and science meet. A single thought can change your respiration, your heartbeat, your body tension. One single thought. And so being able to see that and then recognize that the emotional reaction that creates is not present moment experience. And so just going into the actual physical sensations in your body is what undercuts the whole reactive response. Okay. So I want to give you a few illustrations and hopefully have a little bit time to talk. So 2 years ago, February the 19th, I don't consider myself the poster child for much of anything, but that day I became the poster child for the older guy on a ladder cutting trees who shouldn't be. And you may remember that that year was the year that January, the rains were so heavy. And I knew that, and I'm always really cautious. And so I had checked the ground and what have you. So I was up there for about 20 minutes cutting, just about ready. And I'm on a big extension ladder, so my feet are 12 feet off the ground, right? So, I mean, you're way up in the, they consider this fall from that distance of your feet a traumatic fall. So I feel one side of the ladder start to go, all right? So I reach up for the limb, and of course I've just cut it off. You know, so I go and this ladder goes out from under me and I come down. And when you're 12 feet, it actually takes a while to fall. You know, I mean, it's not fun. And the ladder went under me. And so the ladder was like this. And on my right side, I fell on it. So it's kind of like taking a loaf of bread and, on the side of all right. Which was really fortunate because it prevented me from having a head injury. Okay. But I broke my back in 5 places. And it's a miracle that my spinal cord wasn't damaged. I mean, really like a miracle. So my son-in-law takes me to the hospital, brings me home, and sits me down on the couch and turns on the TV, and we got food in the refrigerator, and he says, "Okay, Dad, is everything okay?" And I said, "Yeah, you take off." And he had put the TV controls over here on this side, okay? So I thought, okay, well, I want to change the station. So, I reach over, and the next thing I remember is waking up from passing out, okay? And so I was doing that, like getting in and out of the bed. And I'm not going to be too explicit, but in the bathroom, I found myself passing out. I mean, the pain was like extraordinary. So they said, well, don't lift anything more than 5 pounds. And yeah, like I could lift. But the first time I like this coffee product called Coffee Mate. It's kind of a creamer. And so it comes in, the larger container is 2 quarts, which is 4 pounds. So I fixed a cup of coffee. And so I said, okay, they give me all these rehab exercises. And I say, okay, well, I'm going to test the 5 pound thing. So I go over to lift this up and I try to lift that and I almost pass out. It's like even 4 pounds was too much. So, I stop and then I go back, and this is the contemplative part. I start to do this and then I just hear my mind like screaming at me, like, don't do that. You're going to pass out. You can't do that and what have you. And so, one of the key elements of a contemplative practice is to try to stay in present moment experience so that you're distinguishing between what your mind or your emotion is telling you and what the experience is. So the way this applies is I'm doing this and my mind is like basically setting up, emotional reactivity, a startle response about like, do not pick that thing up. And so that thing that we just did where you go, just follow your breath, release on the out breath, do that 3 or 4 times. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm not hurting now. I'm okay. All right. So like, what if I step back here and do that? Okay, I can do that. What if I go another 2? No, I can't do that. I can start to feel the pain. So from real experience, from actual experience, not what my emotion or my mind's telling me, I'm finding out what I can do and what I can't do, right? And so I use that all the way through rehabilitation, all the exercises they give you and what have you, as just the model. Like I'm going to get in real time and I'm not going to believe what my mind is telling me to do or not do. I'm not going to believe what the emotion is telling me to do or not do. I'm actually going to base it on my actual experience. And so I did my rehab on, I'm in, like, I don't mind saying, fantastic shape. I told Ken when I looked in the mirror today that I had an immediate response. And the response was, buddy, you need to lose 5 pounds. But other than that, my back's in great shape. I mean, like complete total recovery. It's amazing. And I did it in half the time that most people do their recovery. And I'm convinced, and I did this, I've had both of my knees replaced. I use the same model for that by just staying in real time and listening to your actual experience and not getting confused with the emotional response that's taking place. Like, okay, I'll just set that to the side. What's the actual experience? Okay, so here's the second illustration. On Tuesday, I went in, I was hoping that my dentist was going to be here because I told him I was going to talk about my experience on Tuesday, and maybe he was afraid to come. I'm not sure. But has anybody had a negative experience at the dentist's office? So I had a crown, a gold crown that must have been put in, honestly, like 45 or 50 years ago. And so after all of this time, right at the edge of it, there was a little cavity or something. So they were going to go in and take that off, file this down. If there was any cavity inside, they were going to fix that. And then I have a temporary right now. So this practice of just like breathing and letting go, I just use that all the time. And I found that like really effective at the dentist's office. So I'm at the dentist and I'm sitting there. Here, I'll act it out again. So I'm sitting here and, I've got the dentist here and the technician here. So you've got two sets of hands in your mouth. And, I'm here and the dental technician, I don't know if she was new or what have you, but I mean, like she was really applying a lot of pressure to my jaw. I mean, it wasn't very pleasant. And, the dentist is, and so I'm sitting there breathing, and let go. And I notice that I'm starting to have a real reaction to it, And so, we've all heard about flight and what have you. So our sympathetic nervous system makes us breathe, our heart rate increase, which takes our senses and lights up our senses, which, in this case, because you can't do anything, may not be very helpful. Now your senses are more alert, right, to what's going on. And then the other thing that happens is that your muscles start to tense, and that's to get ready to do something. So this is going on all the time, all day long. And so this is part of homeostasis, of our body staying in balance all the time. So I'm not in fight or flight. I mean, I'm not that lit up, but I can see, like what's going on. My hands are really tight, and like this is for me not normal conduct. So I close my eyes and I go into my body and I say, well, actually what's going on isn't really a problem. I mean, like, I'm all numb here, so I'm not experiencing any pain. I can feel pressure, but no pain. The noise is a little annoying, but as long as I don't make a story about it, like, oh my God, what's he doing? Putting a drill in my mouth. As long as I don't go there, that's not a problem. This thing with the technician is like, well, it's kind of annoying, but I mean, that's not a big deal. So I just open up, as I open up to the body as a whole, and immediately what comes up is an image that's like rolling in my mind. When I said it's a process, memory is a process, and what it is of an experience like 45 years ago where I had gum surgery, which is really painful. And my recollection of it is that it was torturous. So it was just like, boom. So then what I could see was happening is I was experiencing the present moment through the memory. So it's like I'm not looking at the thing itself that they're working on my tooth. I'm seeing it through the memory, right? And this is the big problem with memory and reactive habits that we have. So then, once I saw that, it's like, okay, all right, so I'm just going to go back into my body. I'm going to relax parts of my body, just allow that image to start to fade. And actually quite quickly, able to get back into a sense of pretty much comfort, and not having. So I'm hoping from these two illustrations, you can hear that the practicality of processes that normally seem like, we're withdrawing, or they're esoteric, or they're just spiritual. They're all those things. That's another component. But in terms of real life, they can be really powerful. So the problem with this is that our mind is taking all of these different things, storing them, and then recalling them. And we're not actually recalling an event. We're recalling our reaction or our impression or our story about an event. And that's the reason that sometimes you'll have a memory, and the most dominant part of the memory will be hearing. You hear a song, and and you don't even remember the last time you heard the song, right? Or you had an emotional reaction to something. And so the memory comes up, and you'll have that emotional reaction, but you won't be able to report much about what happened. So I used to do mediations a lot when I was a lawyer, where you get two groups of people who are trying to solve a problem, and you're shuttling back and forth between them. And after sometimes a couple of days, you'd get to the point where, we're really down to it, and most of the time it's emotional. And what you'd find is that there would be one key event that was driving everything. And most of the time, what would happen is that you could actually get people to agree on what happened, but you could not get them to agree on what it meant. And their memory was what it meant. It wasn't so much the event. It was like, well, they don't tell me what he meant. I know what he meant, right? Well, that's an opinion. It's a belief. But that gets stored, and it never gets questioned. This is the key part with our memory, is that it's stored and we never revisit it. So we repeat it over and over and over again. And so, like all the dysfunctional habits we have, just pick out your favorite dysfunctional habit, okay? Anxiety, frustration, resentment, your relationship with your distant sister. It doesn't matter what it is. Every time you think that, it gets pulled up. And what gets pulled up is this package that includes the emotional reactivity. So every time that gets reinforced, and it gets stronger. And we don't question it. We treat it as if it is accurate and reliable, which it is not. So then we identify with it. And so it's like, well, I'm just the kind of person who gets really anxious. Well, there's not that much I can do about it. Well, that's not true. Or I'm just a depressive personality, or, it's hopeless with my sister. Well, those may be true, but more often than not, they are not true. And it's really common to have people come into our courses, our meditation courses, and within 6-8 weeks, we have many therapists in town refer people to our courses. And for migraine headaches, TMJ, traumatic stress syndrome, all of these things. And for people to make really significant progress just through learning what I'm talking about. It seems so simple when at first it's hard, because we put these all together. we call up a memory and we actually think that the thought, the emotion, the feeling in the body are all the same thing. That's how they're not. So once you can learn through these techniques to start to take those apart, it changes your whole experience, right, of the thing. And it gives you some distance. So now I can see this with a little more calmness, equanimity. So, looking at the clock. So what to do about this? I have a couple of recommendations. The first one is, I think if you're even faintly interested in memory, and all of us who are aging have all of these questions about whether our memory loss is what it actually means. And there's a wonderful book called, surprisingly, Remember, by Lisa Genova. And Lisa Genova is the one who wrote the book that became a movie called Alice. They got an Academy Award for it and everything. This is the most fantastic book. I'm recommending this to everybody. It's a quick read. It's as an author, she's fascinating. And this will answer 95% of every question you have about memory and aging. It's a fantastic book. So it's very comforting. And it also gives you a lot of signals of to look for things that may be a signal. The second one is, there's lots of different contemplative and meditative practices around. So I would encourage you to at least consider exploring that. And a wonderful book, and there's also tapes on it, is called Wherever You Go, There You Are. Wherever you go, there you are, which comes from Emerson. And Emerson was a depressive. And he referred to, having this friend who was this depressive friend. And he had this dream that he always thought if he could get to France, with all of the coffee cafes and the artists and on the scene, and, his depression would go away. So he got there, and surprisingly, his depression didn't go away. And he wrote an essay, and the essay was, "My depression, wherever I go, there you are." So this book is by John Kabat-Zinn. And he's the one who was the first person really to figure out how to language all of this so the medical community could understand it. He came up with a method. I went back and trained with him called mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's primarily a pain-oriented meditation program. And this is a collection, little chapters, usually 2-3 pages at the most. And it's a real nice little introduction to all different kinds of contemplative and meditative practices that are very accessible. So, I mean, this is so accessible that you can read 2 or 3 pages while you're on the toilet and not pass out. It's that accessible, okay? All right, and then the third thing, and this is just practical, is that a place to start is just to reflect in your own life. Like, where do you have reactive patterns? And we've all got them. Where we have emotional reactivity and we just immediately go on automatic pilot. Those almost always will have something to do with memory. And so if you can just start to begin saying, when you see yourself reactive, just step back just a little bit, take 2 or 3 breaths, let go in the out breath, and say, gee, is this something about other than what's happening right now? And open up to that, and then try to stay in the present moment experience. That's a place to start. So, okay, so I guess we've got like 2 minutes. Do we have time for a question or not, or do we let everybody go? No? Okay.